Welcome to San Joaquin Spotlight, a public affairs program featuring conversations about life in the central San Joaquin Valley. This program is brought to you in partnership between KFSR 90.7 FM and CMAC Fresno. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian, and we are in the CMAC studios in downtown Fresno. We've got a volunteer crew behind the scenes making this all work out. And as I sit here and talk to you, we have a former female boxing champion. We have a fitness commander. I mean, you have many titles. So what is your title that you go by?
Goodness, I have a lot of titles, and I think the one I'm most proud of is wife and mother of 3 children. That's what I'm most proud of. But as I was raised in the Valley, grew up playing sports, and then also at Fresno State, that evolved into a boxing career, which I was
So you've been in sports
all
ever
my
since.
life.
Okay, so what motivated you to get involved in sport? It was a great decision, by the way. But
In sports or boxing?
In sports first.
In sports, well, when you live in the country, you're no stranger to hard work. And, you have the ability, or we used to have the ability to be a 3-sport athlete. We could play volleyball, basketball, softball, soccer, because there were so few athletes. Now it's unfortunate with so many kids playing sports that kids have to really narrow down their interests from a very early age. I had the opportunity, coming from Lee Grand High School, which is just north of here, a little bit south of Merced, small farming community, to play volleyball, basketball, and softball growing up. Just loved it.
And there will be some people who say, why do you let your kids, like not your kids, but there'll be people who accuse parents of letting their kids do sports too much and then not get drafted in the NFL or not get drafted in basketball. I mean, so do you suggest that kids get involved in sports?
Well, I think sports really teaches teamwork, camaraderie, leadership. So it's good in skill building for society. I do not think, however, that you should push or force your kids to play sports. I do have 3 children. All of them have played sports. My daughter is just finishing up at Fresno Pacific on a volleyball scholarship, which she busted her rear end to get, and wanted to play every minute of it. My second daughter also played volleyball, but now has a career in the U.S. Navy. She's stationed in Oahu.
Oh, wow.
Aloha.
Oahu. Okay.
I know, it's awesome. But, her athleticism and being on a team really helped her when she got into the Navy in boot camp on how to follow orders, how to be a team member, how to play the game. And then my son is he's 17. He goes to Clovis North and plays basketball. And so, he's looking forward to having his education possibly paid for, but that's not the reason that we play sports. It's to get the experience and to be associated with other kids that have a good coach that are teaching them life skills as well.
Let's backtrack and talk about why you even got involved in boxing. I mean, I don't mean to sound sexist when I say this, but there's a lot of parents out there who will say to their daughters, what are you doing getting involved in boxing? That's a man's sport. I mean, did you...
Well, and times have changed. Now, think about this. I want to go back to 26. I'm 42 now. That was when I was 26 years old. I had just had 3 children. I was still overweight.
So you had children and
all 3.
And then you went to boxing.
Correct.
Interesting.
Exactly. And my husband is a Fresno police officer, and I was overweight, and I'm in this beautiful home, and I had been raised not to have a lot, and here I am, 3 healthy kids, beautiful Northeast home, Fresno home, and I'm thinking to myself, God, this is not very satisfying. I needed to compete still because that was what I'd done all my life. And I was actually watching the Olympics, and one of the finer members of our community, Shelly Stokes, I don't know if you remember that name, from Fresno State, played softball on the Olympic team.
Yes.
I was watching her get a gold medal on her neck, and I was like, man, I should have kept playing sports, and I just had the desire to do something, be athletic, and also take off some of the extra body weight. So I asked my husband to train me in martial arts, which he was a point sparring contact karate guy back then. So I started going into the martial arts, and from there, his sensei said, wow, you need to fight in the national championships. And back then, the national championships from women, if you're familiar with boxing at all, as a male in the sport, you have to go to what they call smoker events and qualifiers all year long, accumulate points, and then you will be invited to go to the national tournament. Well, back then there was only a handful of women that were actually competing. I trained in my garage for 10 months, filled out an application, and thank God my mother was still close by because she watched the kids, and I went and fought in Anaheim in a ring, the first time I'd ever gotten to a ring, in a national championship, and placed 3rd in the nation. From there, I set a goal to become a world champion in 5 years. And just because of the lack of women in the amateur ranks, I ended up turning pro 2 years later, and I fought for 3 years as a professional, accumulated a record of 18-0 with 11 knockouts and 3 world titles.
Well, and so let's talk about the first time in the ring.
Oh, wow.
So here we are. You have lights all
Crazy.
around you, and somebody's coming after you, and they're coming after you to hurt you.
You know what's really crazy, Sevag, is when you go from headgear, which in the amateurs you have 12-ounce gloves, chest protector, groin protector, and headgear. And you know, a lot of people are like, oh my God, boxing is so violent. That is actually one of the most stringently regulated sports by the National Boxing Association. You have to get CAT scans, you have to do HIV and hepatitis testing. They're very stringent on protecting athletes. So you're going to see more concussions in the NFL than you are in boxing. But when you transition from amateurs to pro, you go from 12-ounce gloves to 10s, no headgear, and then all of the other protection short of the mouthpiece is optional. Not to say that I didn't wear every piece that I could, because if somebody allows you to protect yourself in a sport, obviously you should go for the protection. My first pro fight was at the Fresno Fairgrounds, my daughter's birthday, and I can't even remember the year now. I believe she was probably 10, and she's 21 now, so
well,
that's almost 11 years ago.
Mom is fighting, by the way.
Right. It was awesome. I knocked the gal out in 39 seconds, but I can tell you, it was crazy because as an amateur, you know, you'll point spar, and if the ref separates you or there's, you know, maybe a foul or something, you'll touch gloves. Well, I knocked this girl down almost immediately, and of course she gets up and I touch gloves, and then I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing? This is a fight. There's no headgear. And I just finished her. I mean, it was ridiculous. And the adrenaline from fighting is ridiculous. But nothing like it.
In which fight, did you ever get hit hard enough where you kind of lost it? I mean, because, you know, people who don't fight may not know, you know, in boxing.
It's called getting your bell rung. And I will tell you, I had 2 very tough title fights. One was against an undefeated fighter, and we clashed heads. She came down, we clashed heads. She had braids, and it cut my head to the bone, broke my nose in the 3rd round. Now, because we created a very good team in the corner, I actually had a doctor in the corner, and she was able to put Q-tips at my nose, stop the bleeding, and I fought to a split decision. And it was a hard-fought win. Another fight, I was preparing to fight a southpaw, and at the last minute, the opponent was changed, and I fought a very game fighter that boxing had been in her background
And you
forever.
hadn't prepared for that.
Not so much that I hadn't prepared, but all of the movement that I had been training for was opposite, and I stepped to the left when I should have stepped to the right, got caught with a right hook, and for the first time in my career, took a knee.
I want to talk about that because many people who have not been in fights don't understand that sometimes you get hit and you lose it. And so you looked out, you got hit and then you looked out, what was going on?
There's a spot right behind your ear if you get hit in just the right spot. And not to say, that wasn't the first time I'd ever got my bell rung, because I trained with men fighters my entire career. I sparred with men to get ready to fight women, and I had gotten my bell rung several times before. And the thing is, if a fighter gets their bell rung or, you know, gets cut, and they're not prepared mentally to deal with it and to know, what do I do? A very good sparring partner of mine said, you ever get your bell rung, you drop your knee to the ground, you take that 8 count, you look at the ref, you wipe your gloves off, you stand up at 8, and you let them know you're okay. Now, not to say that you couldn't get hit so hard that you couldn't recover, but I knew what to do.
So if you had not taken the knee, do you think that you would have won that fight?
I do, because I have the mindset to win. And the crazy thing is when I went down, I looked to the corner, which my husband worked the corner, and next to him, if you'll appreciate this, was Pat Hill. Pat Hill worked 2 of my 3 world title fights.
Interesting.
And they looked more worried about the fight than I did. I knew I was going to get up and win. But I fought to a win as well on that fight.
So when you first won the title, you're up there and they're giving you belts. What's going through your mind?
It's just, it's an incredible rush of adrenaline. And probably for the first 24 hours, you can't sleep. You're thinking about what happened, how you could have done better. And any athlete will tell you the worst possible thing for them to do is to review footage of what they did, because they're looking at it, and when you're in the ring or you're on a court and you see the video, it doesn't match up into how it felt. And it's probably the best medicine and therapy and game plan for the next route out, but it's not always fun to watch because you see all the things that you could have done better. Makes you a better athlete in general, but it's not always the funnest thing to watch.
Are you still a fan of boxing? I mean, sometimes you get people who go through a sport and they've done it so much that they don't like it. And the reason I bring it up is someone like Andre Agassi in tennis, he's done so much, and he was honest and said, you know, I didn't love the sport or something like that. And it's easy to say, but how about you?
Boxing is an interesting sport, and the actual act of boxing and the actual fight, I loved it. Everything else surrounding it in regards to the lead up. A lot of the things that you hear about boxing are true and so much more, meaning there's a lot of corrupt things that go on in boxing.
Which is sad because you're in the ring, someone like the boxer's in the ring, taking the punches, and then behind the scenes you hear of stories of someone else banking the money.
Fixed fights, you know, somebody going in prematurely, taking a fight when they shouldn't have, setups like that. And that's why when we got into the sport, and I say we because it was really my family's decision, my husband represented me in the ring in contract negotiations to make sure that we maintained integrity. And when I decided to retire, I had won 3 world titles out of 5, and people go, why are there 5 world titles? And that's what I thought. To me, there's 1 world champion. And if you know anything about boxing, the way that world titles are brought about is a sanctioning body, which means a group of people get together that have money, and they create a list ranking 1 to 10. And in order to fight for the world title, you have to pay a sanctioning fee.
Interesting.
Okay? Once that sanctioning fee is paid, the fighters have to be within the top 10, which means number 10 could fight number 1 for a world title. Number 8 could fight number 2.
As long as the money is paid.
Correct. And to go in and to defend a title, sanctioning fees have to be paid as well. So it is a very interesting business because boxing is a business. And when I got in it, there was only 2 world titles, and then there was another one. So I won another one. And I fought everybody that I deemed a credible opponent in the top 10. And keep in mind, rankings are opinions. They're opinions, not necessarily records. They're opinions of the sanctioning body of who they think is a worthy opponent to be in the top 10.
Is there still a career in boxing? And the reason I ask is because look at now, you've got the other type of fighting coming out.
MMA. Oh, MMA is probably more watched than boxing right now. And I think the greatest champion right now in the sport of boxing is probably Floyd Mayweather. And second to him would be Pacquiao. And, you know, a lot of people were very disappointed with the last Pacquiao decision.
Yes, I was watching that fight, and I heard a lot of people make comments about that fight.
I don't even do pay-per-view anymore because of the corruptness in the sport. And, you know, it's sad that Pacquiao won lost because my understanding is he really handed the guy his back end. But keeping in mind, those promoters are going to make a lot of money on the rematch.
Right.
And so you kind of look at that in retrospect. And even in MMA just recently, and I've watched MMA. I honestly, I love the ground sport myself. And if I was a lot younger with less injuries in my knees, I would probably love that as well.
You are in great shape, by the way. I mean, I follow you.
Not the same gal I used to be, but I can still do a lot of pull-ups.
And shifting gears a little bit, I follow you on Facebook. I mean, so I know what all the cool projects you're doing. I know that at 5 in the morning, you
Yes.
get a group of people up and you make them work out. You could have done this anywhere. I mean, you can go anywhere in the world and say, I'd like to start a fitness program, and it'll
Absolutely.
be successful. Why here?
Well, this is my home. And, you know, it's very needed in the Central Valley. I've been doing outdoor fitness boot camps almost since I retired in about 2004, 2005. And I got into doing it at a very low rate. My boot camps are only $5 a session. It's a $45 drop-in rate,
And the price
every
is
day of the week.
So $5, if I want to come out one morning and learn from you and work out with your team, $5.
We have a drop-in rate. And I'm, you know, not everybody can afford $5 either. And so I have what's called a fitness scholarship. If someone has really got a hardship, all they have to do is talk to me. And I've had people go on and off scholarship as maybe they've gone in and out of employment or hard times with their family. I'm very compassionate to people, and I really do want to help people because a lot of people just need that motivation, that help, that guidance, whether it's nutrition, whether it's working out, whether it's just somebody telling them, you know what, you can do it.
What's the rule? I mean, and we were laughing a little bit off of air before we started. I'm a rice fan, I'm a carb fan, and you could tell. But what's the rule for someone like me to work out and be in shape?
I say that all foods fit, and if you're trying to lose weight, don't over-exercise, and that's where a lot of people make the mistake. They think, I'm going to go out and I'm going to exercise, which in fact they're feeding their habit basically. You know, if I work out all this hard, I can eat as much food as I want. And if you look at portion sizes over the years and all of the additives that we're putting into our foods these days, if you can stay with raw food in its wholest form, you know, even if you're eating potatoes and you're not adding all the garbage to the top of it.
You mean potato chips are not
You know, moderation is everything. It really is. And I try to teach people moderation. Having some baked lays, making your own chips, those types of things are very important, but not starving yourself as well, because when you go on that all or nothing plan where you're eating super duper healthy and you're working out all the time, pretty soon you're going to crash. So it's finding that balance, taking small steps, and reaching a goal. The goal should be a healthy body fat for your height, your weight, your age, and your activity level, which that is very diverse among the people in our valley.
So what about the people who work full-time? They've got families. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. And
so do I.
You're smiling because
and I became a 3-time world champ doing that.
So, I mean, give us some advice. I mean, you know, the average workday is 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. Give us some advice on how you would, or how you did structure it when you had a family.
Well, you know, I am very abnormal. And like I said, my husband was a police officer, so my kids were under the age of 5, all 3 of them. So I really had to have a huge dedication to getting up at 3 in the morning and doing cardiovascular activity to get my run in when I was competing. And then again, after the kids went to bed at 7:30 or 8, my husband and I were in the garage boxing. So it really, when I said it was a family thing, it really was. But what if you're a normal person and you've got kids, you've got a husband, you've got an 8 to 5? Well, I have a lot of parents that, some of them will come to my morning boot camp, some will come to the night. What if you just boot camps out of the question? It's too cold, it's too hot, whatever. Figure a way to do family events outside, whether it's going to the park, whether it's taking the walk together. I always tell couples the best time to decompress with each other is a good walk after dinner. Even when it's cold, bundling up, taking a bottle of water, taking the kids, swaddling them up, put them in a stroller, get some time. That will give you energy, increase fat burning, metabolism, and it is so good for your mind and body.
Water. You mentioned it. A lot of us don't get enough of it.
Especially in the winter, because it's so cold and it's not refreshing. It's just like, oh my God, it's kind of shocking.
So how much water should we be drinking?
Oh goodness, at least 8 cups a day. If you're exercising more, a little bit more. And every caffeinated cup that you have, that cup of coffee in the morning.
Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that.
And hey, you're talking to the caffeine queen. I love it. But you've got it. That's a dehydrator and it's a stimulator. So a lot of people will just drink their cup of coffee in the morning. Then they're not hungry because they've stimulated themselves to get past that hunger. It's an appetite suppressant. and they won't be thirsty either, but in the same time, they're dehydrating themselves. So I say, try to have something for breakfast in the morning, sip on the coffee, but also have a glass of water. And in the winter, it's always important, if you have a bottle of water, cup of water, whatever, instead of tucking it into the refrigerator so it's shocking, keep it on the counter. I always put a bottle of water by my toothpaste, and right after I brush my teeth, I'll do a bottle of water. That's 2 cups, 16.9 ounces in one of those bottles, and then I'll take a couple on the way to work. And every time you can think about it, of course, it increases the trips to the restroom, but it also flushes out your system, keeps you hydrated, and if you are working out, it will decrease your muscular soreness as well.
Everybody who comes on the Spotlight has a magic wand and gets to make one wish. What is Jenifer Alcorn's wish?
God, this next year, wow, a wish. God, I wish I could just get Fresno and Clovis moving and provide fitness to areas of people that they're not ignorant people. They just sometimes aren't educated on what and how to do it. And we started a program down in Southeast Fresno a couple years back. And this was a bilingual, I don't speak Spanish. I should, where I'm raised. I just, you know, when you're really good at school, the teacher makes you a TA and then you don't learn anything. That happened to me in Spanish. So thank you, Miss Villalpando. But, you know, crossing the barrier of language and educating all the races in our community on how to make small changes and just be healthier for it. Teaching kids to love exercise the way I loved it when I was a kid, so that when they become adults, it's not something they have to do, it's something that they want to do.
Speaking of kids, I mean, your program is geared towards adults or kids? Talk a little bit about your program.
My program is geared toward the adult, but depending on the child, there are circumstances when we have a mature child that can come out, and I'm talking in their teens. I always ask if they stay with their parents because there may be some types of equipment that may be a little bit too heavy. I tell the parent to use their best judgment. But we do some kettlebell classes, which they're iron kettlebells, that the kids can have 5 or 10 pound kettlebells, and it's relatively stationary. So it's a good, safe environment where they can have fun. And it's always fun for a kid to see their parent working out. Number one, because they can make fun of them later. And number two, because they see their parents setting a healthy example for them. And when parents set healthy examples, when teachers set healthy examples, when role models that we have in our community set healthy examples, then kids are going to follow it.
You know, when we were getting prepared for this program, a couple of people came in and asked who your guest is, and I said, Jenifer Alcorn, and quickly someone did this.
Oh, yeah.
So let me ask you, I mean, you've been out of boxing for a while, but it seems like the people in town still know you. Is that common?
Yes, it is. It is pretty common, and it's funny because every once in a while I'll still get somebody to come up and say, when's your next fight? And I'll say, right now. But no, I've been out of it way too long to make any type of comeback. It was a great sport while I was in it, and when I got into the sport, it wasn't to make $1 million. It was to create a name for myself and my community and to open doors for myself. And I really did find a niche in fitness because I really do love working with people. I love motivating kids. I work with several different teams within the community, and I teach young athletes how to prevent injury so that they don't have to suffer through some of the injuries that I suffered when I was in high school. And I teach them to be motivated and have mental toughness and to stay with sports as long as they're having fun.
Let's talk a little bit about the kid who's somewhere right now, could be in Fresno, could be around the nation, who's going to grow up to be a world champion. What advice would you give that kid, and what advice would you give the parents of that kid?
Always be supportive. Make sure, and depending on what world title we're talking about, and if we're geared towards boxing and females, and I'm just going to acclimate it to myself, if you're a father, be with your daughter every time she goes to the boxing ring, because there are a lot of people that will take advantage of young talent. And guide your children, but also, and this is something that I'm doing with my own son, he's a young man, and he's going out to get a scholarship in basketball. He needs to know how to promote himself, how to be respectful to a coach, look them in the eye, be respectful, and show that he's a good man, number one, a good scholar, number two, and a good athlete, number three, because I think that's the order of which it should occur. And as a young athlete or a young person, if you have a dream, follow it to the end and encompass yourself with the right people that will be successful.
I want to talk about that because you brought it up, and a lot of people have the philosophy that you are who you surround
Absolutely.
yourself with. So even in something like athletics or boxing, that's true?
Even as we get older, you know, the people that you associate with, that's who people are going to associate you with. And I surround myself with good people in my community. When I was in the boxing ring, my husband was in my corner. Pat Hill was in my corner. I had a doctor in my corner, and I had a very close friend that was in law enforcement that I could count on in my corner. I had a corner of integrity, people that I could depend on. So that's always important, to surround yourself with a cloth of people that are diverse and that can bring something to your life.
We're running out of time this week on the program. It's flown by the way.
I know.
But how can people find out more information about you? How can they come to your boot camp? There's actually a boot camp in the parking lot next door.
I made these people come downtown. You know, and that's the thing. I pull up in my truck and trailer, and it's like, hey, let's go. That's how the military goes. Sometimes they fast rope out of helicopters, and they just got to go to work. So, you know, God bless America. You can find my boot camp by going online, and the easiest way to find it is Google Jenifer Alcorn Boot Camp, and you will pop it up. Very easy to find. You can also watch me on channel 26 every Wednesday. I do a fitness and a nutrition segment with Kim and Kopi. They're awesome people. they're very, and talk about two other great people in the community. Very community-based program. Great. That's the easy way to find me, and you can also address any questions there as well. You can find me on email. I'm also on Facebook under Jenifer Alcorn with one N, Jenifer, not Jenifer. So easy to find and more than willing to help.
We're out of time this week on the program. That's all for this edition of San Joaquin Spotlight. Our guest this week has been the one and only Jenifer Alcorn. Thank you to the volunteer crew that made this and every production possible. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you to our viewers on CMAC, AT&T, and Comcast. Thank you to our listeners at KFSR. Thank you to our guest. Great interview. Tune in next week to a new edition.